Och ni får även förse er med varsin mick där om ni tar. Så då lämnar jag ordet till Emil.
Ja, tackar.
Välkomna.
Tack. Hello everyone, my name is Emil Olsenmyr and I'm a project communicator for the Church of Sweden's International Department. With me today I have
JP Heath from Church of Sweden. I'm a policy advisor on HIV, sexuality and theology.
And today we're going to talk quite a bit about gender justice and how religion can be used in that topic. Today we have two books under the theme of human dignity and human sexuality. Why?
Well, Church of Sweden has been working with the themes of human sexuality for some time for ourselves. But as we've been working with our partners and with churches around the world, and particularly the churches that we partner with in Southern and Eastern Africa, we've seen that the way in which the Bible is interpreted sometimes leads people to a position of gender inequality and leads to a position of criminalization and discrimination against people on the grounds of their sexual orientation. And so in 2014, during the Uppsala Festival of Theology, we had a stream for sexuality, human dignity and human sexuality. And from there, we birthed first the first book, Behold, I Make All Things New, and now more recently, the book, I Am Divine, So Are You.
All right. Is there still relevance to talk about the biblical teaching when it comes to gender, sexual and gender-based violence and even issues of sexuality?
Well, Emil, I think that's a really good question. And for many people in Sweden, it would still be valid. But when we're talking about people in Africa particularly, your whole life is governed about what you believe the Bible says about various issues. And I'll give you a couple of examples. At the moment when we work in Tanzania, for instance, we have very high levels of discrimination against people on the grounds of sexual orientation. If you speak about homosexuality or are perceived to be speaking about homosexuality, you can be put in prison. You can be locked up. Even though there's no law against it, it's understood that you're trying to promote homosexuality. So it's very important that we give people tools within the Bible to be able to unlock these topics. And in terms of gender justice and gender equality, again, by looking at the way in which the Bible is constructed, we can see that there is a great equality in creation. The equality in creation says that male and female are created at the same time. Genesis chapter 1 has these wonderful verses where it says, and God created them. Male and female, God created them. So it's at the same time. And so by helping people to understand that there's an equality of creation, there's not a hierarchy of creation, it gives us tools to help them to look at it in a different way.
Okay, good. But these books look at these kinds of questions about human dignity and human sexuality through the Abrahamic faiths, but also the karmic faiths. Why has the Church of Sweden been involved in a book related to the karmic faiths?
Well, I think the first reason is because...
and maybe we should explain what the karmic faith is.
We have a tendency as Church of Sweden, naturally, to look at things through a Christian lens, because we are a Christian church. Yeah. But the whole world is not Christian.
No.
And the whole world is not Muslim, and the whole world is not Jewish. And the karmic faiths, that's Hinduism, Jainism, Sikhism, and Buddhism, represent just in India more than 1 billion people.
Yeah.
And so when we were looking at what sacred texts say about human dignity and human sexuality, we wanted to expand it beyond the Abrahamic faiths and try to look at what other faiths say as well. And there, of course, we discover too that inherently, historically, there has been an affirmation for dignity, not a discrimination against diversity. So really we entered into the second book trying to expand our understanding of world religions, bringing in more than just the Abrahamic faiths and looking now also at the karmic faiths.
Yeah. Do you have had any responses or reactions to the books? And if so, what kind of reactions?
Wow. I have to say that your question warms my heart, because I've received so many emails, Facebook messages from people across the globe who write and say, "You have no idea what you've done to my life. You've set me free." And those emails have come to me from not only people in Subsaharan Africa, where we do a lot of this work, but even in the United States of America and in Vietnam, and across the globe, people are saying these are books that, as they've read them, they've been able to understand that God not only created them, but God celebrates them for who they are. And so that their diversity is not something that separates them from God, but rather something that is affirmed by God. And that's a fundamental difference from a perspective where you might think that your faith community rejects you, to a point that you actually say, no, but the God who is behind my faith community is the one who looks at me with joy and gladness and says, "In wonder and beauty I created you. Yeah. What you are, I created you."
Yeah. And in India, you had a quite delicate or glorious reaction to the book. Can you tell us about that?
So, one of the oldest statutes on the law books in India has been Section 377 of the Indian Penal Code, the section which criminalizes homosexuality. And recently, that particular section of the Indian Penal Code was tested in the Constitutional Court. And as they tested it in the Constitutional Court in India, the question was, what do our faiths also say about homosexuality? And this book, I Am Divine, was handed up to the judges as evidence of the inclusivity that our faiths have shown in terms of human sexuality. And just a few weeks ago, of course, the Constitutional Court found Section 377 unconstitutional. So we celebrate that in such wonderful ways, because we know that our own exploration in this regard in the Church of Sweden has helped liberate millions of people in India.
Yeah, it's glorious. A big part of creating this book is an organization called Gin. Can you tell us a little bit, who is Gin?
It's not just what you drink with tonic.
No, exactly.
Gin is the global interfaith network for people of all sexes, sexual orientation, gender identity and expression. And as you get from its name, it's a global network of faith. And they are trying to, from the various world religions, say, we are people who are gay, lesbian, bisexual, transgender, intersex, asexual, queer, questioning, and we are in faiths. We are not outside of faith. Yeah. And we find ways within our faith to affirm the diversity of creation. Now, these two books, we have worked with Jinsoji in terms of their production, and what we as Church of Sweden have chosen to do is that while we have done the bulk of the work in relation to having these books researched and these books written, we have committed that all money that is raised from the sale of these books will go to Jin to help their global work. So if you want to buy these books, the money goes to Jin. None of it comes to the Church of Sweden. All of it will go to Jin. And so if you want to take one, buy one for yourself, buy one for a friend, know that you're becoming part also of a global advocacy movement that is set to liberate people.
And you can buy the book both at our booth over there and at the book square over here. But creating of these books is the first step. What is the next step?
I have to say that when we had the first Uppsala Festival of Theology with a stream of human dignity and human sexuality, I didn't dream that a book would come out of it. Now we're talking about 5. Here are 2, and a third book is coming out very soon, which again looks at human dignity and human sexuality, but from the perspective of indigenous traditions and spiritualities. And so there we are looking at the traditions and spiritualities found in 8 of the world indigenous communities. The first of those is the Sami, and then we also look at the First Nations from North America, the Polynesian people from Hawaii, we look at the Lumad from the Philippines, we look at the Berber from the north of Africa, the Khoisan from southern Africa, and the Aboriginal people. Yeah. And then we're also looking at some indigenous traditions and spiritualities from India itself. And that will be the third book. Very briefly, what we have found is that before Christianity, there was a whole lot more acceptance of diversity. And the way in which Christianity has been colonized has meant that Christianity has been used to erode dignity rather than build it up. And these books try to expose that. The fourth book is a book that was written by Dr. Renato Lings, and he's a linguist. And he's taken the Bible very carefully and re-looked at it both in the Hebrew and in the Greek. And he exposes mistranslation. So he shows ways in which we've translated discrimination into the Bible, so that if we go back to the original, we find that the meaning is quite different. Yeah. And then the fifth book in the series will be looking at very sensitive topics from the perspective of 4 of the world religions: Christianity, Islam, Hinduism, and the Baha'i faith community. And we try to look at our sacred texts and delve into more deeply what do our sacred texts say about these things. So that's what I didn't think was going to be a book at all, but just an evaluation of the Abrahamic faith's response to human dignity and human sexuality has turned out to be a series of 5 books.
Yeah. You talked about, briefly, you mentioned colonization and stuff like that. In working with these books and going out and more like, you are the editor of these books, but how do we preserve human dignity and their human dignity in the books by, aren't we going in there and telling them what is right and what is not?
Yeah, Emil, that's a really good question. And the reality is that the Church of Sweden has deliberately stepped very lightly. And what we have tried to do is find experts from various world religions and facilitate them telling their story. So this isn't our story, this is their story. And Devdutt Pattanik, for instance, who introduces I Am Divine, So Are You, has published 40 books on this topic in India. And we're delighted that he was willing to work with us on this, but that lends an authenticity to this book, which is different from what we would have been able to offer if we, as Church of Sweden, sitting here in Scandinavia, pretended that we had the right to speak about these topics. Yeah. All we can do is facilitate the voice of the voiceless, the voice of those who have not really had the opportunity to speak their truth into the world. And as Church of Sweden, we have sought out those voices and we seek to lift them up.
Perfect. If we look at these books and the context of them, do you think that there is any application to the Swedish context with the with the story in the books?
Yes, because Sweden is not quite as single-focused as what we might want to think. You know, Sweden isn't just Christian.
Yeah.
Sweden has more faiths than simply Christianity. And I think what these books encourage from all people is to go back to your sacred texts and look at them with new eyes. And these books try to give us the tools to do that and to find again the love story of creation. Because that's what we're talking about, the love story of creation. We're talking about this immeasurable love of God that births humanity simply by God's love. And we try to restore that love relationship with God.
Yeah.
And in that, to affirm the human dignity of every person. And we very frequently hear in the news, in Sweden and abroad, how one person is considered more valuable than another. Maybe as a Swede you are considered more valuable than someone who comes as a migrant. These books say no. Our human dignity is equal because the God of equality created us equal.
Brilliant. I think that's going to be the last word of this seminar. JP will be in our booth talking about this and maybe talking about more about any books if you have any questions. Otherwise, we'd like to thank you for your attention and wish you a pleasant day. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you very much.